Okay, what's going on? My name is Bobby, and I will be addressing the Pacific Railway Act of 1862 and the product of it, which was the Transcontinental Railroad, the effect that that had on America, and then also the decimation of the Native American populace that came really as a result of this. So this all stems from the sense of manifest destiny that the United States had a divine calling to spread west, which was driven ultimately by economic and geographical factors. People wanted that agricultural land where it wasn't inhabited. People wanted the opportunity for gold in California, ultimately driven by a sense of racial and cultural superiority that led to a total disregard for indigenous populations in search of wealth. So obviously, with any expansion, any type of invasion, any type of disregard for another population, there will be conflict, and it was inevitable, which has resulted in many bloody confrontations, such as Battle of Little Bighorn, Wounded Knee Massacre, Battle of Tippecanoe, etc. As you can see in this picture, is General Custer, who famously died in Custer's last stand, the Battle of Little Bighorn. So at this point in the nation's history, 1860, there was total domestic control. There wasn't really any foreign controlled areas in what is now the modern United States, or at least the geographical area of it. There was multiple territories. You can see like Utah, New Mexico territory that weren't official states yet of the Union, but they were ultimately under the control and influence of the American government. So that being said, the American government was desperate for expedient and aggressive economic and geographical growth in these areas and to kind of connect them to the rest of the country, which led to the idea of the Transcontinental Railroad. So the road to the railway was ultimately the government giving land grants to the corporations, the railroad corporations, with a total disregard for the potential indigenous nations that inhabited this land. Land grants were often given with 10 miles on either side of where the railroad would be, which would later be amended in later acts to be up to 100 miles on either side of the railroad. So massive chunks of land were taken in order to set up the in order to free up the land where this railroad would eventually be put. Fun fact, Virginia Tech, at this point, the Virginia Agricultural and Mechanical College, was founded due to a land grant from the Land Grant Act, signed into legislation by President Abraham Lincoln. So, following the land grants, the railway acts could be signed into action. The original was 1862, but I say acts because later on, 1864 to 1865, there were basically new acts that just kind of served as amendments for the original. This is mind blowing to me. But by completion of the railway, 175 million acres, which is more than 10% of the United States, and a bigger area than the state of Texas was utilized for the railway and taken away from the potential inhabitants, the Native Americans that lived there. Also very interesting, settlers were incentivized to inhabit this land. So this is an example of an advertisement for some of this land that was in Kansas. Um, Everybody wanted to live near a railway station, which resulted in around these railway stations, just towns and population centers popping up. So, like I said, the impact of the railroad was it made the world a whole lot smaller. Here you can see San Francisco and New York reaching out for each other, while the Native Americans at the bottom have to run away, being driven away. Towns and population centers sprung up everywhere. Also interesting, didn't know this until I did this research, was this vastly increased our military strength through the ability to rapidly and effectively mobilize. So it put us higher on the world scale, but then again, disastrous for the Native American populace because of American encroachment. This is a famous picture, which is in the background of this slide, is two guys standing, one in front, one on a giant stack of bison skulls, buffalo skulls, because the famous saying was, for every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. So we attacked them at the root and made basically their land as uninhabitable as possible by just destroying a massive food service. So it wasn't just the land grants that stole their land, it was the aggressive influx of Americans as they were incentivized to move into this land. They brought our own culture, our own industry, our own population centers, and actively decimated theirs because I believe I say in the next slide, but the removal of indigenous populations was directly correlated with economic and social growth for Americans. And this serves as a railway. The railway serves as a microcosm of a nation because this is what we've talked about basically all semester, is that the lack of a holistic view of many historical events and trends. And that's the danger of a single story. That first video that we watched in class, we often tell the Transcontinental Railroad story as a story of great American success, and it's often viewed in the eyes of history as a patriotic turning point. However, the holistic view would be focusing on the fact that it absolutely decimated entire cultures and nations in the name of economic and social and cultural prosperity, and just served as zero regard for native nations, while simultaneously being viewed as one of the greatest American successes of all time, maybe one of the greatest successes just in the world, period, for what it did. And that would be the dangers of telling that single story, which I personally believe is what we focused this whole year on. And I appreciate you listening. Hope you guys learned something. And there's the Works Society page. All right. Thank you all.